All right, hello everyone. My name is Will Orenshaw, and this is my sociology course project for Sociology 150 at Cascadia College. So yeah, this is the table of contents. We're going to start with the intro, then move on to the learning objectives, give a little background on this project and the neighborhoods that I've chosen. Next is the statistics for the neighborhoods, then the research questions and their answers. Give some visual descriptions of the two neighborhoods, conclusion, and then the citations. So in this presentation, we will examine racial segregation in housing and urban living in King County in areas that not only include housing, but also include education, income, and total population. So the purpose of this presentation is to compare and contrast a majority white neighborhood with a majority minority neighborhood. Through the use of the website Social Explorer, I've identified two, I don't know if they count as neighborhoods, they're actually census tracts, but for this presentation, that's what I'm going to go with. One, like I said, with a white majority and one with a minority majority. Yeah, so from Professor Yadev's syllabus, the learning objectives are, for the course as a whole, are to learn actively, think critically, creatively, and reflectively, communicate with clarity and originality, and interact in diverse and complex environments. The learning objectives for this course project specifically is to apply the sociological imagination as a lens to analyze social inequalities, acquire, construct, demonstrate sociological knowledge by engaging in guided experimental activities such as research or service, research specifically for this course, or for this course project. Use social scientific evidence to support claims relating to social inequalities. Use technology to access information related to social inequality. Use oral, written, or digital communication to demonstrate understanding of topics, and practice using APA style for citations and references. I put in-text citations on most of the slides, and I'll have a full citation page, actually a couple of them, at the end. So a little bit of background, the segregation of Seattle neighborhoods has been around since the founding of the city, with racially exclusive housing practices dating from the 1910s all the way through the 1960s. Specifically, these were called racially restrictive covenants, and they were agreements entered into by a group of property owners, subdivision developers, or real estate operators in a given neighborhood, binding them not to sell, lease, rent, or otherwise convoy their property to specified groups because of their race, creed, or color from a definitive period unless all agree to the transaction. So the purpose of these covenants was basically to ensure that housing and businesses in Seattle stayed white-owned, and the areas that they were in stayed almost exclusively white. This wasn't an entirely anti-black tactic either. The covenants included Hispanics, Filipinos, and even whites of Jewish nationality or ethnicity. So throughout this course, we looked at housing in King and Snohomish County and the racial divide, and how the racial divide was the result of things like racial covenants, which I mentioned earlier, and discriminatory lending, and the ways that these practices have echoed through the past until now. All right, so for the majority white neighborhood, I chose Census Tract 216 in King County with the zip code 98028, map courtesy of Social Explorer. I chose this one mainly because it's one that I live in. It was so it was the easiest to find pictures on, and it is overwhelmingly white. For the specific population, with a total population of 4.7 thousand, 83% of those were white alone, with the next largest ethnic group being Asian alone at 9.7%, followed up by two or more races at 3.3%. The lowest was the Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander, with only 13 individuals, or 0.3% of the total population. Excuse me. So for the statistics for the majority white neighborhood, looking at 1,750 total households. Of those 1,700, 74% were family households, where non-family households were at 25.4%. Of the family households, married couple families was the vast majority at 61.8%, with other families being 12.9%, Female-led household 9.4%, and male-led household 3.5%. For the non-family household, it's actually split almost exactly evenly between a single male householder and a single female householder. Educational attainment for population age over 25, the highest was some college at 38.1%, followed next by a bachelor's degree, the four-year bachelor's degree at 28.4%, and the third highest was high school graduate and its equivalency. Excuse me. So I'm not sure what exactly some college is. If the next one is bachelor's, I assume some college refers to the 2-year associates, like what we're trying to get here at Cascadia. I don't know for sure, but I wonder if it also includes things like vocational schools or, on-the-job training. So, but yeah, only 5% of the people in this census tract have had less than a high school education. For the financial statistics, from population ages 18 to 64, 3.8% are considered living at or below the poverty line, whereas 96.2% are considered to not be living in poverty. And the median income is $63,000. For the minority neighborhood, I chose Census Tract 107.02 in Southwest Seattle. In King County, the zip code 98116. So for the statistics, the total population was 6,140, whereas the white alone population was at 30.9%, Black or African American alone was next highest at 21.6%. Or no, excuse me, the next highest was the Asian alone at 26.6%, followed up by the Black or African American alone at 21.6%. I should mention here that Social Explorer, in the free version that I use, they did not include Hispanic populations, which I find kind of weird, but with the Hispanic population added in, the white population would still not have a majority, so this one still works for my purposes. Of this neighborhood, 66.4% were considered a family household, with 34.6% being the highest of the family households being other family. I think that includes, multi-generation homes or 2 or more homes, 2 or more families living in the same home. The next highest was married couple family at 31.7%, and very high was the female household without husband present was at 28%. For the non-family households, it's again split almost perfectly evenly between male households and female households. All right, the educational attainment for population age 25 plus. The highest here was some college at 31.4%, followed very closely by less than high school at 30.5%, followed again by high school graduate or its equivalency at 22%. So some college was the highest. Compared that to the majority white neighborhood, who had a post 4-year college rate of 13%, including doctorate, master's, and professional school, while the majority minority neighborhood had only a combined 5% for those post 4-year college rates. The poverty statistics for this neighborhood, 23% are considered living at or below the poverty line, while 77% are considered to not be living in poverty, while the median income was $27,000, which is nearly 2.5 times less on average than the majority white neighborhood. So for the first research question, I asked, why did the majority white neighborhood have lower high school attendance rates but higher, or why did the majority white neighborhood have lower high school attendance rates but higher high school graduation rates? And according to a study I found, it's believed that overall attendance, while important, the defining statistic of academic success is overall your GPA. The second research question, are environmental issues more closely related to air and water quality or building materials used? The Department of Ecology said that air quality is the predominant factor in short-term environmental health. So of the 5 main air pollutants, things like carbon monoxide, lead, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, particulate matter, and sulfur dioxide are the immediate health concerns of environmental issues in neighborhoods or residential areas. Why do you think that Washington State, a state with so many places named for native tribes, has such a small Native American population? So in the 2020 census, of the 7.6 million people living in Washington State, only 138,000 are considered Native Americans. And the main reason for that is land issues. From the mid to the end of the 19th century, 2 major legislations led to huge losses of land for the native peoples of the Pacific Northwest. The Donation Land Act of 1850 and the Dawes Allotment Act pushed many native peoples out of their ancestral homes in favor of white settlers, farmers, and gold rush miners. These forced migrations resulted in very few native peoples returning to the Pacific Northwest or having been allowed to stay there in the first place. For the fourth research question, do you think that school resources allocated are directly proportional to the income of the surrounding areas? And the answer is sort of, but not actually really. Washington State runs by a system called local control. That means that each school district is run by elected school board members, while funding for each school comes mainly from state and federal levels, as each school district is given funding based upon how many full-time students are enrolled for that school year. This appears to show that resources are not allocated by the income of the surrounding areas, but rather the population size. But with more students coming in, you have, less resources being spent per individual. So yes, but kind of not really. It's a weird subject. What sort of incentives or actions do you think state and local governments can take to promote more racial diversity in housing and education? The biggest issue seems to be transportation. I found a study from 2016 that said to keep African American families from moving into white neighborhood localities in the past would place the only schools that served African American children in designated African American neighborhoods and provide no transportation for African American students who lived elsewhere. Allowing for free movement to the schools ranked the highest, and those that the parents believe will give their children the best education possible is the best way to promote racial diversity in public education. But the issue of transportation comes up again. So should those issues be fixed, I think that will incentivize a lot of state and local governments to be able to promote more racial diversity in not only housing but education. So this was my pictures from the field study of the majority white neighborhood taken in 2021. And these are pictures taken from the majority minority neighborhood also in 2021. It was beautiful days in both of them. So the difference between the two neighborhoods is not very profound from a purely visual standpoint. Both have well-maintained roads and public spaces, as well as well-taken care of plant life. The major difference was the majority white neighborhood was almost exclusively single-family houses, while the majority minority neighborhood had a fair amount of apartment buildings and other multifamily residences, with public spaces like libraries and medical clinics interspersed between the residences. So in conclusion, while King and Snohomish County are not perfect, there are few, if any, major holdovers from the era excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. From the era of racial covenants and discriminatory lending practices. The major barrier for housing remains its ever-increasing cost, more so than discrimination based upon race or ethnicity. So yeah, money rules everything. Houses are becoming increasingly more and more expensive, and wages really have not gone up from that as well. So the main issue, well, education is important for getting your kids, if you're in a family, you want to get your kids into the best school possible. If you can't afford a house there, then that's just not going to happen. So here are all of my citations. Had a couple pages of them. And that was it. Thank you so much for watching.